Hello and welcome back to another FPL video. Today we've got a very important one. We're looking at our Game Week 4 team selection, and it is going to be my wildcard team. Now, the reason it is coming out very late, it is obviously Friday evening, is because I have been moving this team about so much over the past week, and I've really struggled to try and find an exact team that I do want. Now, I do feel as though this is 100% going to be the team that I'm going to go for, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently today. We've got the team on screen first, and then I'm going to basically spend the rest of the video talking about my reasoning for my picks, because I've got like stuff in the spreadsheets that I do want to show you as well. So I felt like it was just going to be easier to show off the team at the beginning, which you can see on screen. Now, a couple of these picks you will have seen over in my best wildcard video last week. The likes of Nick Pope in goals. I am basically between Pope and Sanchez, and I do feel as though Pope is going to be a really nice pick over hopefully the course of the season, at least until my next wildcard. He is basically going to be the long-term pick. I think him and Sanchez both are fantastic long-term picks, and I don't want to have to make any goalkeeper transfers this season, and I would rather, like, I can see myself in future basically having a Chelsea defender. You know, Tosin and Cucurella both look like fantastic options. Even Chalobah looks quite good as well. Newcastle not really so much, so I would rather have, you know, a Newcastle defender and goalkeeper in there, and if I do need any Chelsea cover, then I will just go for a defender. So that's obviously, there was a little bit more in-depth reasoning to that, but that is all over in the wildcard video, so make sure to go and check that out. It will be linked at the end of the video if you haven't seen that already. In defence, I've got Van Dijk and Gabriel, two premium defenders. I will explain those picks when we do look further in. I've got Munoz as well, who I think is basically in every single person's wildcard draft. He was one of the first players in the team for this week. Then my 4.5 million starting defender is going to be Senesi, and then I do have Agbadou on the bench, who again I will be talking about in just a little bit. But basically the plan is to bench boost in game week 5 and then free hit in game week 6 as well. So 3 chips getting used over the next 3 game weeks, and again we will go a little bit further into that. Salah is going into the team this week. I definitely want Haaland. It's unfortunate that I couldn't fit him in, but I did feel like the midfielders was more of a struggle than the forwards. Right now I feel like there's a list of like 5 or 6 forwards that I really would like. Midfield not so much, and Salah over the next 2 games I do feel has the potential to do really well. Haaland, I'm obviously going to be free hitting him in for Burnley at home in game week 6. Other than that, we'll see what happens in game week 7, who I'm going to take further, but I do feel as though over the next 2 game weeks, Salah's definitely the one I want to go for. Semenyo again, first man in the team sheet. Great fixtures for Bournemouth coming up, and he's been fantastic over the first 3. Now, Yeremy Pino is someone who he was the last man coming into the team basically, but obviously we've got no underlying stats or anything with him to see how good he could potentially be, but Sarr has been ruled out for game week 4 and 5, potentially back for game week 6 and 7, so he is pretty much nailed on for the next 2 game weeks, and I will speak about my plans with him in today's video as well. And then up front I've got Watkins, Ekitike and Mateta. Again, Ekitike is someone who I probably will only have for 2 or 3 game weeks and then look to move him out, because I do expect Isak to come into the squad and really reduce his minutes. Watkins, I'm going to give him a second chance, and again we will speak a little bit more on that as well. And then Mateta, of course, with Palace's great fixtures, completes the triple up with those guys. On the bench we've got King, Anderson and Dubravka. The other 3 I haven't mentioned yet, really just budget options used for the bench. But I'm going to talk a little bit now as to why I've picked each of these players, so let's jump straight into it. Now, what I've done is I've taken a leaf out of FPL Fran's book. If you aren't subscribed to him, he obviously does a cheat sheet for basically every single game week, and it basically goes over all of the positions of players and kind of going through their stats. And basically I made one for myself kind of to help me decide who I best wanted on a wildcard. So this is kind of what we're looking at, and yeah, so it's very much based on FPL Fran's cheat sheet, and this is kind of how I decided who I felt was the best picks for each position, basically. So I've split them into categories of prices. So we've obviously got the cheap ones at the top, the 4.5-ish ones in the middle, then we've got like mid-priced at 5 to 6 million, and then obviously the premiums at the bottom. Now we're kind of looking at the fixtures here, and they have the clean sheet odds beside each of the fixtures, and then beside that obviously you've got all of the stats. So we've got expected points, non-penalty expected goals per 90, expected assists per 90, shots per 90, and then defensive contributions, CBIT, per 90, as well as how well the team has been getting on for the opening games of the season. Now I've ranked these in order, so height order is basically where I feel each player ranks for the next 3 game weeks. Now obviously I am going to be free hitting in game week 6, so my sheet here is based on game week 4, game week 5 and game week 7, so I have missed out game week 6 on this. So pretty much all this week I have been deciding whether I want to go 5 at the back or go 4 at the back, and the 5 at the back obviously doesn't include a cheap defender. Now the cheap defender that I was going to go for was going to be Rodon from Leeds. A couple of okay fixtures in there. Again, when you compare the clean sheet odds to Burnley and Sunderland, Leeds just look a little bit better, and Rodon's defensive contribution numbers look pretty decent as well, averaging 9.33, and Leeds have been a little bit better of a defence than Burnley. I do think if you're going to, long term for the course of the season, pick one. Ekdal could be the one to go for. Obviously I'm playing with my bench boost in mind, hoping to try get that used early, straight after the wild card. So I did look a little bit more at the short term fixtures, but Rodon, Ekdal I think look like 2 decent options. I think Reynaldo obviously plays at left back, he's going to be the more attacking one, but if you actually look at his attacking stats, he hasn't been too great at all. So I would, personally, if I was picking a 4 million defender, just pick someone who is potentially going to get defensive contributions in most games, in which case I think Ekdal and Rodon are those guys. So Rodon is the one, if I was going to pick a 4 million defender, would be the guy to go for, but obviously I didn't. I have opted to go for... we can look down at the premiums now. I've gone for Van Dijk and Gabriel. I think they two just look a little bit better than Cucurella. Now, Arsenal obviously coming into some difficult fixtures over the next 2. Nottingham Forest isn't classed as an easy fixture, and neither is of course Manchester City. But the reasoning for wanting to pick a Arsenal defender, if you look at Calafiore's stats, just a little bit above the bottom, he, for me, looks like the best defender on this entire sheet. Fantastic, clean sheet odds over the next 3 games, and the main factor was the fact that Arsenal have 3 home games, again excluding game week 6, which I don't have on this sheet. So a home game against Nottingham Forest, a home game against Manchester City, and a home game against West Ham. And obviously game week 7 is the time where most people would be bringing in Arsenal players, and I feel like on a wild card it is actually looking like a pretty decent time to buy those guys right now. Now the problem with Calafiore, obviously, expected goals looks fantastic, expected points looks great, shots per 90 he's averaging just under 3, which is obviously great, but it's just the minutes with him that does put me off. I think if I could guarantee that Calafiore was going to start every single game for the foreseeable for Arsenal, he 100% would be in this starting 11, but Lewis Skelly is obviously the backup there. He's the guy that could potentially come into left back, and Calafiore is prone to a substitution for that reason. Now obviously the injury to Saliba for a couple of weeks could mean Calafiore moves into centre back, but you could also say that with Urian Timber as well. So a little bit worried with Calafiore, and that is why I have went for Gabriel in my team, because I do feel like an Arsenal defender is going to be just as good. The fixtures, the clean sheet odds look fantastic, just as good as or even better than Liverpool, who everyone says obviously Van Dijk is a must own if you are going to be wildcarding, and Gabriel's stats look just as good as well, with debatably a better defence. So that's why I've gone for Gabriel. Again, Van Dijk is in there as well with fantastic CBIT, averaging 14 over the first three, and obviously Burnley and Everton look like great fixtures for him, and hopefully some clean sheets in there as well. So I do think the two premium defenders is going to be worth it. Munoz as well, again, lots of greens across the board. The next 3 4 clean sheets, 44% against Sunderland, 26 against West Ham, and 30 against Everton. And of course, expected points wise, he is the highest on the entire table. And I think he, again, like I said, is one of the first names on the team sheet for me. And then I was left with 2 more players to pick. I went for Senesi. I do think Richards is a little bit better, but I've obviously already got Munoz. But Richards, I think, does look a little bit better than Senesi. It's just the fact that I've already got Crystal Palace cover that he's not going to come into the team. So I have went Senesi, who does still have nice fixtures. Brighton, Newcastle at home, Fulham at home, again 3 home fixtures for Bournemouth, and his CBIT looks fantastic as well, averaging 14. And I do expect him to hopefully pick that up in most games, and he would probably be in the starting 11 for most games as well, because the Bournemouth defence is pretty solid, ranked at 5th for the opening 3 games as well. So he's hopefully going to be a season hold as long as he can keep up those CBIT numbers. Then finally, obviously, is left down to that final defender. Now again, I was down, potentially going to go for a 4 million defender, but I had 0.6 million left in the bank and opted to go for Agbadu. Now that's, the whole reasoning for that, again, he isn't very highly rated for me on this list, is because of that game week 5 fixture against Leeds at home, where he does have some pretty decent clean sheet odds at 34%. Now, he's basically just going to sit on the bench. Again, I can pull up the fixtures here, in terms of, the best defensive fixtures, which we looked at on our wild card. Wolves have really, really nice defensive fixtures for the upcoming games, so he can just be a nice bench option that I can rotate over the next couple of weeks, and he is just a little bit better than Rodon, of course, for that game week 5 bench boost. So that's where I'm at with defenders. You can obviously have a look at this for yourself if it does help you, in any way. This is all just my opinion at the end of the day, looking at some of the stats. But yeah, that's why I've picked the 5 defenders that I have went for. Moving on to the midfield, again, as I said at the start, was a very, very much a position which I very much struggled to find players that I wanted for the upcoming games. You can kind of see with game week 4, 5 and 7 there isn't a lot of green fixtures going on, especially for that mid-tier kind of range. The Everton guys all have Liverpool away in game week 5. Arsenal and Man City obviously play each other. So obviously I've picked who I've picked in King and Anderson, 2 very, very cheap options. Again, looking at the mid-priced or the cheaper budget midfielders with Anderson, Paqueta, Caicedo, Dewsbury Hall and Reinders. I do feel like Anderson is, a very clear winner in there. His defensive contributions are really, really nice. Obviously only beaten by Caicedo there, but attacking wise, I think he just has a lot more potential than Caicedo does as well. And he is someone that can just pretty much play anytime I need him to play, with a nice fixture against Burnley in game week 5 as well. With a little bit higher expected points, I just feel like he beats Caicedo in that mark. Paqueta was someone that, is... I think for Paqueta, I wanna give it a couple more weeks for him before considering him. He is obviously a little bit more expensive at 5.9 as well, so that is obviously a factor. But I don't think he looks really much better at all than Anderson. If he is, I don't really see anything. So Anderson was the pick there, the guy I've already got since game week 1. Obviously hasn't picked up defensive contribution points yet, hoping that he can over the next few weeks, and I would expect him to, because he looks really good, obviously getting 11 in all 3 of the opening games. King obviously in there as a budget pick. I don't think he looks good. He's really never going to play, but he's got a decent fixture against Brentford at home for the bench boost, and that is really the only time he's ever going to make or his points are ever going to contribute to my final score. Then I've got 3 spots left. Now, Mohamed Salah came in again. Already mentioned it. I think he just looks a little bit better than Haaland for Burnley and Everton. I think if he doesn't perform in those games, there's a very high chance he comes out, and then I just move Haaland into one of the striker spots. But Salah locked, 22.5 expected points in those 3 games as well, way above any other midfielder. So hoping he can start to perform well. He's obviously hasn't fully blanked. He hasn't had a 2-pointer in the opening 3 games, so we are just hoping for those double digits now. And then the other midfielders, Bruno Fernandes was a consideration, just a little bit expensive for to match with the defenders and forwards that I wanted. Semenyo was obviously absolutely locked in. His XG looks fantastic. 3.33 shots per 90 as well, and he is very, very high for expected points now as well. And again, another player that has 3 home fixtures in the next 3 games that'll play him. So that left me with one other spot. Mbeumo, by the way, looks very, very nice. He is planned for me to come in game week 7. I was very tempted to go for him, but Man City away and Chelsea at home just weren't fixtures that really appealed to me at all. So I am going to start with Pino, who isn't actually on this list because he doesn't have any stats to actually look at. But I'm going to start with Pino. Again, for Palace, they have 2 really nice fixtures in the next 2 games, and then I will move to Mbeumo for that game against Sunderland, and then Man U have a fairly decent run. I think they've got Liverpool after that in game week 8, which isn't ideal, but after that he does have a decent little run, and his underlying stats, again, I would probably argue that Mbeumo has been the best midfielder in terms of stats, probably outside of Semenyo so far in the opening 3 games, and I think he's very underrated, and I haven't really seen him picked in too many drafts at all. And then I'll move myself over for this one because there's not really too many players available at forward, but these are the forward shortlist that I was looking at, and Erling Haaland is, for me, I mean, for most people in general, looks absolutely brilliant in the opening games. I think he's scored in 5 of the last 6 games, but I do have Ollie Watkins over him. Again, a lot in terms of value and fixtures, I think it is for Ollie Watkins. Obviously, he is 5 million cheaper than Erling Haaland is, and very clearly has some better fixtures. Now, I couldn't bring myself to selling Ollie Watkins before, Everton, Sunderland and Burnley. Burnley and Everton are the 2 worst defences in terms of XG in the last 3, or in the opening 3 games, and Sunderland as well is going to be an okay fixture for him. So for me, I think he was just someone that I had to include in the team. I was very tempted by Gyökeres as well for the same reasons as Gabriel. Gyökeres is one I want to bring in game week 7, and a game against Nottingham Forest with Ange Postecoglou as the manager, I would expect Arsenal to score a few in that game, so I'm worried about Gyökeres, and I think he could do quite well. He just didn't fit in the team that I did want to go for. Ekitike was the guy that I'm choosing. Burnley away and Everton at home. Again, 2 really nice fixtures, and I don't expect Isak to really be included too much in those games. And then again, Ekitike is planned to come out in game week 7, potentially for Gyökeres as well. And then the other player I'm going for is Mateta, again, to complete that the Triple Palace. Again, 2 nice fixtures with Sunderland and West Ham, a decent fixture in game week 7 away to Everton as well. Good expected points for his price, comparing to the likes of Gyökeres, roughly the same, and decent underlying stats as well so far, averaging 2 shots per 90, and of course now is the penalty taker for Crystal Palace. So that is where I'm at with the team. Hopefully that has helped a little bit. Moving over to the team on Fantasy Football Hub, and this is why I really do feel as though this is the plan for me. I do think this is exactly what I'm looking for with my team. I do have 1.2 million in the bank as well, which does really help obviously when trying to make transfers in a couple weeks time. I do want to try and make as little transfers as possible. I think with defensive contributions coming into this year, it is really possible to have a lot of set and forgets, and that is kind of what I want to have with a lot of players. Anderson I want to keep long term, Senesi I want to keep long term, Munoz again another player that could easily be kept long term, Gabriel, Van Dijk potentially as well. But looking at this team, obviously a 96% game week rating in game week 4 and a total 97% team rating as well. So game week 4 is looking very, very solid for me, and this is how the bench would look as you've already seen. Moving into game week 5, where I would look to use the bench boost chip, and again you can pretty much see why. Pope is, he's a little bit less than Dubravka, but Pope would be the starting goalkeeper here. So I'd have Dubravka on the bench up against Nottingham Forest at home. Probably wouldn't expect a clean sheet there from Burnley, but hopefully some saves. At least I know he's going to be starting. Senesi's playing against Newcastle, again at home. Would expect defensive contributions from him, if not a clean sheet. I've got Pino as well, who's playing against West Ham at home. He does make the bench for this game as well. I could potentially just drop someone else to the bench, but he is the one that is recommended to go on the bench, and I think that's still a great fixture for him to do really nicely in. And then I've got King, of course, against Brentford at home. So decent fixtures for the lot of them. At least I know they're all going to start as well. And if you really want to add up, the total bench points, you're looking at potentially like 5, 6, 10, potentially 14 points there from the bench boost, which I think is good enough. I think if you can get above 10, I think you are looking for maybe about 12 to 15 points from a bench boost. If I can get 14 points from that, I would be delighted, and that way I don't have to worry about it either, and I'm not putting a lot of money on the bench either with that. So some nice fixtures, and again a 95% game week rating in there with still a 97% total team rating. Now game week 6 is where it gets a little bit tougher, an 83% game week rating, but obviously this is going to be the week that I use the free hit, because I don't want 3 Palace players and 3 Liverpool players playing against each other. Everyone else actually looks not too bad. I've got Gabriel against Newcastle away, which isn't ideal, so just a week where I wouldn't want to have the players that I do have. And you can see kind of down this side, Chelsea are kind of playing against Brighton at home, City are playing against Burnley at home, players that I would have for this game, for this week, and this is, for me, I just think the easiest time to use the free hit. Now game week 7 is where I start to use the transfers. Now I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. So Ekitike came out for Gyökeres, Pino came out for Mbeumo, and Virgil van Dijk came out for Tosun, and it leaves me with this team, which again I think is a very, very solid team for the upcoming game weeks and gives me a game week rating of 95%. Moving on to game week 8, we're looking at 94%, game week 9, 94%, game week 10 is where it starts to drop again a little bit. But at the same time, I've got transfers in the bank. If I put Munoz in the starting 11, it brings me up to 92. And this is where I think a lot of people are going to start wildcarding, towards that. But the game week rating is absolutely huge. 12, we're looking at 94, 11, 93. So I think I could really save transfers with this team from game week 7 going forward. I've got 2 Arsenal players in there, and Mbeumo, whose stats look fantastic. And we are just kind of keeping the same main structure of the team, which is of course the plan and kind of how I want to play things. So that's pretty much it for the team. Again, I'm really happy with this wildcard. It has taken a lot of tinkering to get to something that I'm happy with. Hopefully you've stayed for the entirety of the video despite seeing the team in the first 5 seconds. But if you did, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you are new. Again, we do have our entire wildcard guide on screen right now. If you are wildcarding, you'll find everything you need to know for a wildcard this week. And also if you're playing UCL Fantasy, make sure to check out my chip strategy video, which is also on screen. I definitely recommend you do play it this year if you are not. It's such a fun game to play, and we do of course weekly content on that as well, which will be coming over the weekend. So thank you all so much for watching today, and I'll see you all in the next one.